Hello, my name is Stacy Bailey, and I'm the Assistant Director at the International Student and Scholar Services Office. This section of the orientation is related to immigration regulations and requirements that you need to be aware of as an international student at Kansas State University. First, I would like to introduce you to our advising team. We currently have 3 advisors that serve our student population. Students are assigned to their advisor based on their last names. So you'll see on the screen that I currently advise students with last names A and Z. Boglarka Davies advises students with last name B through L, and Ruth Newton advises students with last names M through Y. So we're going to go through some basic information about what you need to know in order to maintain your status. It's extremely important that you understand this information included in this presentation regarding your status as you continue with your program here at K-State. Understanding and maintaining your immigration status is your responsibility. Our advisors are here to help and provide guidance, so if you ever have doubts or questions, please reach out. Do not rely on your friends or other K-State offices for immigration advice. Ask before you act. Your ISSS advisors are the experts on our campus. If you do not maintain your status, there could be very serious consequences. These consequences could include an arrest, deportation, and/or future entry issues into the United States. There are many laws and regulations that pertain to you as an international student. We have categorized those into 5 different areas. Number 1, always keep an address on file with International Student and Scholar Services. This is both a US or local address or your home address here in the United States, as well as a permanent address abroad. The local address can be updated through your CASIS account, your student information account, and it must be updated within 10 days of any time that you may move. For F1 students, that's the only steps that you need to take is updating it through CASIS. If you're a J1 student, you also must send an email to isss@ksu.edu to notify us that you made the change in CASIS. Number 2 is our general rules. Maintain full-time enrollment. It is very important that you maintain full-time enrollment requirements every fall and spring semester, as well as summer if it's your first or your very final semester at K-State. We will go over the definitions of full-time later in this presentation. Number 3, always maintain your immigration documents. It's very important that you are aware of the information that's on these documents and to ensure that the information is accurate. You must have a current and valid I-20 or DS 2019 from the school that you're attending full-time. Always keep your I-20 or DS 2019 valid. This means that your program end date should be in the future or accurate as to what your completion date is. If you're not able to complete your program by the date that's listed on this document, you need to reach out to ISSS so that we can help you with an extension process. Get your travel endorsement and understand your travel documents if you do plan to travel outside the United States. You must verify that you have the updated travel endorsement in the necessary section on your document. Number 4, work only with proper employment authorization. F1s and J1s are limited to working on campus. There is additional paperwork and authorization that would be needed if you have the interest of working off campus. Contact ISSS before you do this. Number 5, understand your grace period. After successfully completing your program, there are grace periods, depending on your visa type, that allow you to remain in the United States and prepare for departure, travel a little bit, or even consider transferring to another school or program. F1s have a 60-day grace period, while J1s have a 30-day grace period. We will go into much more detail on each of these rules as we move through the presentation. First, I want to provide a few definitions of some terms that we may use as we advise you. A non-immigrant is defined as a person who wishes to be admitted to the United States for a limited temporary purpose and who plans to then depart the United States after completing that purpose. So F1s and J1s are non-immigrants. A DSO. This is a designated school official. It refers to individuals at institutions, like your advisors at ISSS, with the authority to communicate with the Department of Homeland Security or the Department of State on immigration matters. I serve as the main point of contact for students and colleagues for the Polytechnic and the Olathe campuses. But some of your paperwork will still be processed by the advisors assigned to you. Status. This refers to the actual activity for which you were admitted to the United States to do. So for students, your purpose is to study. The visa stamp. This is a stamp that a U.S. embassy or consulate has put in your passport page or put in your passport that gives you the right to come to a port of entry and ask for permission to enter. So essentially, it's like knocking on the door of the United States requesting to enter in that status that your visa states. The visa indicates the visa type. This should match your documents such as your I-20 or your DS 2019. It also indicates how many times you're allowed to ask to be entered under that stamp. And it also has an expiration date. We have an example later in this presentation. The visa is the only document that can expire while you're here in the United States. So as long as you've maintained your other documents and your status, it's okay that the visa stamp has an expiration date in the past. It's an entry document only. The passport. This is a document that's issued by your home country, and it should be valid 6 months into the future at all times. The entry stamp. This is the stamp that's given at the port of entry when you arrive in the United States. It should reflect the date that you were admitted, the class of admission, such as F1 or J1, and the date the student is admitted until. F1s and J1s should have an admit until date listed as D/S. D/S stands for duration of status. So this means that you're allowed to be in the US as long as you're maintaining your status and other documents related to the F1 or J1. The grace period I mentioned earlier, this is the period of time following the successful completion of your studies. So you can use this to prepare to depart from the United States, or to another SEVIS school, or even continue a different program here at Kansas State. SEVIS. This is the Student and Exchange Visitor Information System. It's the database that we use to report necessary and required information and to issue and produce the I-20 or DS 2019 document. So here's the sample of the visa page. I've highlighted some fields here that I mentioned before. So the type of visa, the number of entries, and the expiration date. Remember, this is an entry document only, so this document can expire while a student is in the US and otherwise maintaining status. This is the port of entry stamp. So this is given upon your arrival. A CBP officer will place this next to your visa or in your passport. It should include the 3-letter code at which the airport that you're coming through the port of entry, the date that you entered, and then the port of entry officer should handwrite in your visa type. So here it's listed as an F1 as an example, and then they should also write the D/S, which is your admit till date. This is the information that you should also be able to find when you go online to retrieve your I-94 number. Which brings us to this example. So this is the page at the top, www.cbp.gov/I-94 is the website that you can go and obtain your electronic I-94. This is your arrival information. So once you're there, you'll see a link to click to say get your most recent I-94. You will type in your information from your passport, which will populate your new I-94 information. And here's an example of what that might look like. Again, we want to make sure that all of this information is accurate for your record. If you have troubles getting this, to populate, or if any of the information seems incorrect, you should contact your ISSS advisor, and we'll work with the CBP office in Kansas City to get this corrected for you. This is a sample of an I-20. This document includes information about your academic program, personal information, and so it's very important that you review this anytime that ISSS issues you a new document to make sure it's all still accurate and up to date. Also take note of the program end date. As I mentioned earlier, this I-20 should not expire. It should be accurate as to when you're actually going to complete the program. Page 2 has information of other benefits such as working off campus or the travel signature section. A couple bits of information that also pertain to the F1. F2 dependents are not eligible to work or study full-time while in the United States. If you do have dependents that accompany you, you also need to submit information to us with their documentation for your file. Or if they depart early, we need to make sure that we have that they're not in an active F2 or dependent status in SEVIS. F2s are permitted to study less than full-time. If you have questions about what that definition is, please contact your ISSS advisor. So here's a sample of a DS 2019. This looks slightly different than the I-20, but has basically the same information as such as your personal and identifying information there at the top, as well as the program information. Again, take note of the program dates. This is a document that should not expire until you have finished your program. Some additional information for those under the J category. There are various categories under the J program. There are students, and under the student categories, there's degree and non-degree seeking students. There's a different category for researchers, short-term scholars, interns. So there are various things that the J1 program encompasses, but what we're talking about under this orientation are degree seeking and non-degree seeking student types. J1 students are issued the DS 2019. The unique part about J1s is that the DS 2019 could be issued by Kansas State or an outside agency such as Fulbright, IIE, USAID. And so those are funding or program sponsors that are outside of KS State, but they're giving them permission to come and study at our institution. So if your DS 2019 was issued by a different program sponsor other than Kansas State, you need to connect with them about information with your status, your documents, and any authorizations that you need to get from them. So for students that are here under the K-State sponsorship, we are the ones that would authorize any benefits or authorizations for you. J1s are still permitted to work 20 hours a week on campus while classes are in session. Those that have sponsorship from somebody else, that you do have to provide an extra layer of authorization. So you need to have a document or a letter from them to verify they allow you to work on campus. And we do have to do a work permit between the department and ISSS that will be submitted as part of your hiring paperwork. Some J1s may be subject to what's called the 212E or the 2-year home residency requirement. J2 dependents, they may apply for work authorization from USCIS, and they are permitted to study full-time or part-time. Dependents are individuals that come with you, family members that come with you that are spouses or children under the age of 21. Same definition as those for F2s. Once they arrive, you should submit their documents to us so that we have it for their files. And if they choose to depart earlier than you do, based on your program information, we should know that so that their records do not remain active in SEVIS if they are not physically here. So the information on these next couple of slides, we are required to give to you as a J1, so you can take note of this, but basically it's contact information for the Academic and Government Programs Division, which is over the J1 category and programs. So if you had any specific questions that are beyond what we can answer, or you can use this contact information. This next one has to do with the Wilberforce Trafficking Victims Act. So basically, we want to make sure that you're aware that there are sometimes programs and agencies that don't do things properly under the exchange visitor program. And so we want to make sure that you have that information, because we want to make sure you're being treated fairly, and that the programs are the exact exchange visitor program. Blanking on a word, under what the program is designed for. So earlier I mentioned that there are two types of J categories. So there's the degree-seeking students that are here to get an academic degree from Kansas State, such as a bachelor's, master's, or PhD. But then there's also non-degree seeking students. And their categories are very different on the DS 2019. There's also the option of non-degree and degree-seeking students under the F status, but there's not as big as a difference in the categories under F, so it gets a little confusing. But those that are coming under exchange programs through our Education Abroad office may come under a 1 or 2 semester exchange and may have an F1 or a J1. And so there's some different restrictions, different policies that are in place depending on what visa type you were on. So enrollment requirements. If you remember, one of our rules talked about the different enrollment requirements. And so here is the definitions that are laid out. So every fall and spring semester, depending on your level of education, that is listed on the left-hand side of this table. The full-time requirements are also listed here on the right side. So undergraduates always have to be in 12 credit hours for the fall and the spring. Graduate students with no assistantships would be 9. Graduate students that do have assistantship appointments could be in 6. And then if you are in the English language program, your full-time enrollment is 18 hours. You'll note at the bottom, we mentioned that there are regulations that limit how many distance courses can count towards this full course load. Prior to COVID, there was a limit that only 1 class, so 3 credit hours, could be counted towards this full course load. So what that meant, if you were an undergraduate, that you had to be in 9 that were on campus, 3 could be online, and that would total the 12 credit hours. Once COVID hit, SEVP did issue some guidance that allowed some flexibilities for this online limit, and that was the case all of last academic year, and they have recently announced that that will continue for the next academic year. Now, that being said, as new students to Kansas State, you are not permitted to be in just all online classes. So there is a requirement that you have in-person or face-to-face courses during your time here at K-State. So for the next academic year, you have to at least have 1 class that is in person or hybrid during every semester. After we notify students that the guidance has been lifted, it will go back to the regulation where it limits that only 1 class can be part of that full-time requirement. So basically the requirement is that if you are going to be physically here in the United States, you need to have classes that require you to attend in person. So for the summer semester, normally summer is considered our annual vacation, but for students that first arrive to start their program in the summer, or if you plan to graduate in the summer term, you are required to enroll in classes. This is the definition for full-time listed here on the screen, so very similar. Undergrad, it is the same, it's 12 hours. Graduate students with no assistantship, it would be 6 hours. Those with assistantships would be 1. Those in your final semester, you may have some other options to be less than full-time, but you do have to get prior approval to be less than that full-time. And in your final semester, if you are in less than a full course load, those cannot be all online. You must have in-person courses. Okay, moving along to some changes that might happen to your I-20 based on your academic program. If you decide to change your program while you're here, you need to go through the process through your academic departments. So you need to notify your current program, and you also need to notify the new program. They will make the changes in CASIS, and then ISSS gets notified of those changes through CASIS, and we will issue the new I-20 for you at that time. For J1s, it is not permitted that you change your program of study once you're here. That could be seen as a change of objective within that category, and that has to be reassessed by the Department of State. So it would require you to depart the US, get a new DS 2019, get a new visa, and then return for that new program. You could change education levels as long as it's in the same area. If for some reason you find that you are ineligible to enroll in a future term due to financial or academic reasons, you need to communicate with ISSS. We need to talk to you about the timeline of how that may impact your status and your SEVIS record. We do get notifications about dismissals every semester, and so we will be reaching out to try to be a little more proactive. But if you foresee these things coming, whether it's due to financial or academic reasons, please communicate with ISSS, and we'll try to see if we can help you before it gets to a point that we have to report something in SEVIS. So that being said, make sure that all emails that come from ISSS you are reading. Some of them may be in general, some of them may be dealing more with our programs, but there are some that still come about your status and your record, and it's very important that you're keeping note of all of those. So this information talks about traveling. There's some things that you need to consider. You must have your documents properly endorsed by ISSS in order to travel and then re-enter if you're traveling outside of the United States. So the I-20 we sign on page 2. On the DS 2019, there's a small box in the bottom right-hand corner. Your passport must always be valid 6 months into the future from the date that you enter. The travel signature is valid for 1 year. I did forget to mention that above. So from when you're coming back, you need to make sure it's been signed within that year. The visa stamp must be valid to enter the United States. Again, it's an entry document like I mentioned earlier. There are very few exceptions to this rule, so we do have some information on our website, but you can always reach out to clarify if you think you qualify for one of those exceptions. Sometimes you show up at a port of entry and you realize you can't find your documents as you thought that you had them in the place in your luggage or your carry-on items. And CBP may decide to issue what's called an I-515. This is a document that they issued to you to say this is what was missing, but based on what they've seen, they're fairly certain that you should be allowed to enter. So they will allow you to enter for a 30-day period. They want this form to be updated with the missing documents and sent to SEVP within that 30-day period. So if you are issued one of these, you need to contact our office as soon as you get back to Manhattan. We'll make sure you have the correct documentation that was missing, and then you will mail it back to SEVP. You need to make sure that you mail it so that you can track the shipping and have confirmation, because sometimes these take a little more than that 30-day period. So very important that you work with ISSS to get that submitted and followed up. If you happen to plan to travel to another country that's not your home country, you need to do your research about any travel restrictions or visas that you need to get into that country. That is not something that our office keeps and maintains. Traveling inside the United States, you don't have to have that travel signature, but we do encourage you to carry all your documents. There are different scenarios that have come up that students need to have those documents. So it doesn't have to have the signature, but you do need to have them with you. And then a note about emergencies. There may be times that you have to depart the United States due to an emergency outside of your control. and maybe ISSS isn't open or not available, it's okay that you depart the United States. You don't have to have the signature to leave. You just have to have that signature to come back. And the other flexibility that we have right now with COVID is that we can email you the I-20 documents in a signed PDF version. And so you can depart. You can email us that tells us the information that you did have to depart, that you need a signature, and we will get that to you via email, or arrange that you can have it FedExed or sent by a different courier if needed. But just know it's okay, you depart. You don't have to wait for us to make that departure and those arrangements. A couple additional tips. Check out our travel page anytime you plan to travel. We put information there. There's some links to the ACLU Know Your Rights, also something about searching electronic devices at port of entries. So these are 2 documents that you may want to read through as you make those plans, to know about your rights legally, what they might look for, what they can look for, what they might ask for. So just making sure that you are prepared with resources as you travel. They may all ask you, again, they may ask you some additional questions about your history for travel, residence, employment, all sorts of things when it comes to traveling or visa appointments. So just be very mindful of those and having resources available to you so that you are prepared. Okay, so some reminders to kind of sum up what I've went over. Remember, you have to enroll in a full course of study at all times. There may be times that academic advisors talk to you about a course that you're in and they say you could drop it. You could, in a sense that it can physically be done, but it may not be in your best interest based on your immigration status. So it's important that you realize you're working with your academic advisors and your immigration advisors to make sure you are progressing through your program and maintaining your status. So before you ever drop below a full-time status, verify with ISSS before that action is taken. If you want to transfer or change your degree level, anything that changes your academic program or status, you have to talk to our office. We need to make sure your SEVIS record is accurate, up to date. If you're going to a new school, that record has to be transferred to the new school, because then they take over monitoring compliance of that record. So always need to check in with our office with that. Remember the program completion date of your I-20 or DS 2019. This always needs to be accurate and in the future. If you're not going to finish, we need to extend it out. And there's some paperwork that we have to do for that. Avoid unauthorized employment. You are only permitted to work on campus for 20 hours a week while classes are in session. Anything different than that, you need to discuss with us before you take any action in doing that. Always have an updated address on file. If you move, you need to update that in cases within 10 days. Your travel signature, make sure that you're preparing for that in advance. So a couple weeks before you're going to travel, make sure you get that submitted to our office. Keep all your documents in a safe place. Make copies of those documents and keep those in another safe place. Do not throw any I-20s or DS 2019s away. When we issue new ones for any reason, put your other ones in that safe place, because later there may be a time that immigration or you may need to find copies or something of that, and we don't necessarily keep them forever. So that is your responsibility. It's your responsibility to maintain your status. So we are here to give you the information, to give you some guidance and advice, but ultimately it is your status and you are responsible for maintaining that. And ask us, don't rely on your friends. I know they're very helpful and I know they want the best for you as well, but they are not immigration advisors. And so make sure you're reaching out to us to clarify and make sure that all the information is accurate in regards to your specific situation. We are here to help you, and we want you to have a very successful time while you achieve your academic goals. So a few other things that I'm going to cover. We know there may be a time that you want to invite family, friends to come visit you. We have a link with some templates there and some resources that you can help those individuals as they prepare for their visa appointments. There's nothing specific from us that you need, but the information is online. Also online, we have information about applying for a driver's license or a state ID. And so that is linked from our website as well. If you are doing this as a new student, make sure that you confirm with us that your SEVIS record is updated and registered. Otherwise, they'll get some pushback from the DMV that your record isn't updated. So make sure you connect with us before you go do that if it's done before the first part of September. Our primary means of communication is via email. And so make sure that you are checking your email. Your K-State email is what we will use to reach out to you. That's what's in SEVIS. So that's the email we'll use to send your I-20s. All of your classes, those are the email communications that they will come through. So it's very important that you keep up on your K-State email. Another thing is that you'll also notice a $200 fee that's assessed to your account every term. This is assessed to every international student account based on the visa type that you are on here at K-State. Information about taxes. So while you're here, you're required to file a tax return, regardless of whether or not you have an income. And so ISSS purchases a tax software each year with some licenses that they help you go through and fill out the federal taxes. You also can use it for state tax filing, but you will have to pay a small portion for that. And so those emails will come out at the first part of the calendar year from ISSS. So make sure that you're looking for those. Some other things to think about and know. There are some legal issues outside of your immigration status that you need to be aware of and keep in mind. We have some presentations on a Canvas course that you will all have access to. There is information about adjusting to U.S. culture, safety and security, legal issues that is given by our police department here on campus. And they cover a variety of things. A couple things that they cover are like state laws versus federal laws regarding marijuana, drinking and driving, firearms. So the example with marijuana, there are some states here in the United States that have legalized the use of marijuana. Colorado, the state to our west, has done this. However, it's still a federal law that it's an illegal substance. So as an international student, you are prohibited from partaking in any activity related to drugs that are illegal at a federal level. So just make sure that you are aware of all of those kind of different nuances. The drinking and driving, you cannot drink and drive while you're here in the United States. The drinking age that is here in the United States, you need to be aware of all of those legal issues because that could very severely impact your immigration status. So this is a lot of information that I've covered, and it's very important information, but we do want you to know that we are so glad that you're here. We look forward to welcoming you in person throughout this new student orientation week and throughout your time. And please just know that we are here to help. So if you have any questions, concerns, doubts, reach out and we are here. We're glad that you chose K-State, and thank you.